All right, welcome to our Thursday evening New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for today, May 4th, with John Saccoman. Before we turn it over to John, just some news of what's been going on and will be continuing to go on. We claim this as May, the month of May, so all the meetings this month are Willie related. Next week, we'll have Jeff Wagner, who will be talking about his new book, Willie the Met. And then the following week, we'll have Mark Simon. Mark contributed to a brand new SABR book called Willie Mays 5 Tools. John also contributed, so he might want to talk a little bit about his contribution tonight. But the reason we have John on tonight is John wrote a great piece in The Team That Time Won't Forget, the 1951 New York Giants. So with that being said, I'd love to welcome John. John is a member of our group and has been on, but want him to be welcomed to the New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for tonight. John, welcome aboard. Tell us everything pertinent to your research and your article you contributed to that fabulous book.
Sure, I do have a little PowerPoint if I could, Gary,
sure.
if you give me the permission.
Sure, absolutely. All yours, John. Hey, Frank. Hey, Perry. Nice to meet
you. Okay.
There you go, John.
Okay, that should be good. Everybody sees that now, good, right?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, so, I'm coming here. I feel free to join in because this is more of a celebration of Mr. Mays than anything else. But I see I still have that pin because once Willie Mays was traded to the Mets, it consolidated my rooting interest quite a bit, being a Mets fan and a Willie Mays fan. So that was great. That was the Daily News. The New York press, and I'll talk about that a little later, just always loved him and still does to some extent. So yeah, so why Willie? Okay, I have to tell you, I know a number of you actually saw Willie Mays play at the Polo Grounds. I was born 6 weeks before the Polo Grounds was torn down. So why am I such a fan? Well, my mother, this is going to be maybe a dirty word, I don't know. My mother was a Brooklyn Dodger fan and liked to watch the Mets because Gil Hodges was managing them. My father was a bit of a Yankee fan, but not as big a fan. And I was reading at an early age. And so I gravitated to the sports pages and the writers. They just loved Willie Mays, and that colored my view of things. And so that's where I come from. I was actually I had to go to a conference in San Francisco for work, and I made a beeline to the stadium. I was there twice, even though it was November. And I also bought this shirt. It's Willie Mays Rookie of the Year shirt that I wear probably far too often. But anyway, so now let's talk about charisma. And this is how I was privileged to be allowed to write the biography of Willie Mays when Society for American Baseball Research started the bio project. The goal is to have a biography for every player who ever played in Major League Baseball. And even though I hadn't, I wasn't a famous writer or anything, they did allow me the privilege of writing Willie Mays's biographical article, which is up on the website and which we take down and modify for some of these books, like the 1951 book, like the 5 Tool book, a book about the Birmingham Black Barons. They had a collection of those biographies. It was in it's going to be in one of the Mets collections, I think. So this has had legs, but again, we change some things once in a while. But this is a quote from Leo DeRocher. Okay, if somebody came up and hit 450, stole 100 bases, and performed a miracle in the field every day, I'd still look you right in the eye and tell you that Willie was better. He do the 5 things you have to do to be a superstar: hit with power, run, throw, and field. And he had that other magic ingredient that turns a superstar into a superstar: charisma. He lit up a room when he came in. He was a joy to be around. Now, that was obviously his father figure, Leo DeRocher, and it was just there was something about even when I saw him playing, he was past his prime. And so I have here there was a Wheaties box that came out a few years ago. with Willie on there. And some, you all might like some of these pictures that are on the back. That's one of the things I've saved over the years. It's in the attic. My wife doesn't go up there, so that's good. Anyway, so that's one of the first baseball games I ever went to, major league games, was in 1971. It was at Shea Stadium, and the Mets were playing the Giants. And Willie Mays got a standing ovation every time he came to the plate. Now, my recollection was that he was batting leadoff, but I looked back at the box scores, and I don't remember what game it was, but for those 6 games, he always batted third. And he was wearing the hard helmet. He didn't, sometimes he had the reinforced, like in the hat, the reinforced thing, but he was wearing an actual hard helmet at that time, and he played first base. And so that was my first encounter, as you will, with Mr. Mays. Okay. But I actually got close enough to meet him at Valley Fair, which was a shopping place, a store in North Jersey here. And
I know where that is.
yeah, it was in Fairfield, New Jersey. I don't know if it's there anymore, actually. But the store, for some reason, they had some Mets there and get their autographs. And so I got Ed Kranepool, Tug McGraw, and Cleon Jones's autograph. And even though you're supposed to only get one, my grandfather, who was a Yankee fan, really liked Tug McGraw, so I got him to sign a piece of paper. He wrote Tug on it for my grandfather. But then the next time they had Willie Mays there. So I have my autograph ball, and there's where Willie signed it. And there's Eddie Kranepool. And there's some other names in here which we'll talk about, but there's Tug and Cleon Jones. So the thing was, my sister was 5 years old, and so the two of us are there getting the autograph. I was pretty much starstruck. I don't think he said a word to me, but he was kind of taken with my sister. He thought she was cute, looking over at the table at him. But what he said, one of the quotes is, "When you come back to New York, you come back to paradise." He always was so well beloved here, and I think he was happy to be able to end his career here. And he also got standing ovations every time up, with the Mets. He was just, there was a connection. And then this was the quote when the Mets retired his number finally this year at a meeting for the Elysian Fields chapter of SABR. After Keith Hernandez's number was being retired by the Mets last summer, we went around the room, who should they retire next? And people said various names. I said, Willie Mays. They said, "You're nuts." I said, "Why? Hank Aaron's number's retired in 2 cities. Why not Willie? This is New York, is where he made his name. It's not going to be the Yankees retiring his number. The Mets." And Steve Cohen agreed with me. So you might lose a lot of details after so many years. What I can never forget is the way it felt to be back in New York City and playing for the fans. Met fans always gave me the biggest ovations and allowed us thank yous ever. Today, I return those thank yous from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, Mets. And that was, of course, at Old Timers Day just this past year. Now, this is a group of Giant fans, so I'm going to just take one diversion from the Willie Mays, if I might. And this is about one of Willie's teammates. I was at a Cleveland Indians game where they happened to be giving out a Gaylord Perry bobblehead, and you can see he's loading up. So I thought that was kind of funny that they put that on the bobblehead for Gaylord Perry, also one of my favorite players. Now, the second time that I got close to Willie Mays was at his Hall of Fame induction in Cooperstown. Is anybody in the group go to that when Willie was inducted back in '79? I can't see the group right now because I have to look at my slides. But
I don't see any hands.
Anybody
up.
speak? No hands up. So here's what happened. My father, my grandfather, myself, and 2 of my cousins. Now, the one cousin was like my father's age, and his son is a little younger than I am. The father was a New York Giants fan, had been, baseball Giants fan. And so went to my grandparents' house in Patterson for breakfast about 4 a.m., drove up to Cooperstown by like 8:30, and then we toured the hall for a few hours. And then they used to have the ceremony behind the Hall of Fame. It was right there, just an open field. Now they go to a school. It's a whole big production now. But you had to stand, you had to get a spot. So I got a good spot. But before that, you could see where the players walk in, like a green carpet, if you will, when the players walk in to there. And so my grandfather was sitting there, and I got Stan Musial on his ball too. And I got, we got Stan Musial signed, and Roy Campanella was there, his wife signed, as she was wheeling him in, which I thought was nice. So I'm standing there and I yelled, I said, "Leo, I love you," when Leo DeRocher walked in. If you see the picture of Willie Mays here, he and Leo had on like matching colored suits. And Leo came by, said, "I loved your book, Leo." He came over to me, shook my hand. "Thank you, son." I didn't have the ball. My grandfather was busy. I guess if I had a choice of Leo DeRocher or Stan Musial, I'd go for Stan Musial's autograph, right? So that's what my grandfather did. So then when, if you might remember, Dick Young, New York sports writer for the Daily News, among other papers, but Daily News at that time, Post and stuff, he was receiving, I think he was getting inducted, the Sphinx, whatever it was, and he was roundly booed by the fans. People probably remember why. He had a big role in the Tom Seaver wanting to be traded out. Yeah, so I remember that distinctly. And I had made a cassette tape of the induction, but I think all those inductions now you can see the transcripts in the Hall of Fame and stuff, but I had made a tape of it and you could hear all those boos and all that. After the induction, we drove back to Patterson and we went home. So that was a nice thing. Now from Willie Mays's induction speech that day, "This country is made up of a great many things. You can grow up to be what you want. I chose baseball and I loved every minute of it. I give you one word, love. It means dedication. You have to sacrifice many things to play baseball. But I'm here today because baseball is my number one love." And so that's what he said to us that day. Now, besides the biographical article, I also have been privileged to write a couple of the game stories. One of them is in the 1951 book. It was for Willie Mays's first game. And I also have one for his return from the Army. I wrote that story in 54, his first day, his first game back. But anyway, so obviously he took a team that had a 472 winning percentage. They were like 17 and 19, and they went 669 the rest of the way. We're finding out there may have been some other reasons why they played so well, particularly at home, but Willie Mays certainly was one of the reasons. Leo DeRocher commented, "I saw something then that I had never seen before in my life. The Philadelphia Ball Club was warming up on the sidelines, getting ready to take infield practice when Willie stepped into the batting cage for the first time. Every player there stopped dead in his tracks and watched him. He hit balls on top of the roof, into the upper deck, the lower deck, all over the park, and everything he hit was a screamer." And I had a dear friend who passed away. He was Irving Zimbler. He had been in the Air Corps in World War II, and we know they had a 50 to 60% casualty rate, but he survived, though he carried in his wallet a photo of his unit the rest of his life. And he was one of three brothers. One was rooting for each New York team, and I had three uncles that were the same. One Yankee fan, one Met fan, one Giant fan. Irving was the Giants fan. And so when I wrote the story about the game, his first game, I gave it to Irving to read, let me know what you think. And this was his quote: "Willie lit the fuse." He thought that bringing up Willie Mays was the catalyst for winning the pennant that year. And I thought, you'd like this picture? This is Willie with Leo DeRocher on a little baseball card. Now, one of the things that I talk about is that Willie Mays has, through the years, more lately, but also has received criticism for not speaking out on social issues like others would. And I just, Jackie Robinson and Kurt Flood in their books said things such as, "Hope Willie hasn't forgotten his shotgun house in Birmingham slums. He faced the same problems that confront every Negro. What has he learned from life? We would like to know." Jackie Robinson said that. And Kurt Flood said, "The great Willie Mays reports from privileged isolation of his huge success that he has nothing to complain about." Willie was all about the competition, okay? And Robinson and Flood were college educated. Willie Mays barely, got through high school, and then he was playing professionally. They had a different perspective than he did also. And he grew up, in the South. And where do we have that? Oh, I'm trying to show something every time around. I haven't had many San Francisco pictures, so here's one for the group. With those in-action baseball cards, Willie sliding in. Like him. Okay. In fact, he was a racial pioneer. He was the first African American to play in the Interstate League. The Giants sent him to Trenton, which was Class B. He couldn't go to Sioux City. There are conflicting reports. Either Sioux City hadn't been integrated or there had been controversy over a Native American burial ground there. Either way, they didn't think it was a good place to send him. So he was signed by the Giants and they signed him to Trenton, again, Class B. He gave his friend money to take his date to the prom because he wasn't going to be there for the prom. And the first game happened to be in Hagerstown, Maryland, which was the only city in the Interstate League below the Mason-Dixon line. And as you can see, he was the first in that particular league. They called him names. And he said, whatever they call you, they can't touch you, don't talk back. And this part really, I felt emotional when I first heard about this. They made him stay in a blacks only hotel across town. And in the middle of the night, five of his teammates came to check up on him. And they came and they slept on the floor so he wouldn't be alone, which I think he actually names them Hank Rowland, Herb Peralta, and Bob Easterwood. And they stayed until morning, which I thought was, really good team guys and looking out for him, which he had throughout his career, people who looked out for him. Here's some here, Piper Davis down in Birmingham, and Leo DeRocher, of course, when he went to the big club. So anyway, he had 108 hits in 81 games in Trenton, batted .353 with 55 RBIs, and clearly outclassed the league. But of course, this is someone who played against Satchel Paige and other would-be major leaguers, so he was not in over his head in Class B ball by any stretch of the imagination. And we know what he did the next year in A ball. I'm not the type of guy to just go out and say, hey, I'm raising my fist to do this and do that. I don't think I'm that kind of guy. I wasn't the leader the way that other people may have wanted me to be. But he did quell a rebellion, at least one. And I think everybody's aware of the Alvin Dark situation when his book came out. Here's a quote, why they have so many mistakes, mental alertness, and that sort of thing. And once the book quotes came out, Willie Mays was named team captain. And he was the first captain since Dark was captain in '56. They never named the captain after that. And I believe he was the first African-American captain in baseball on a major league team. And he held the team meeting. They were on the road. Cepeda didn't want to play for him anymore. And he said, don't let the Rednecks make a hero out of him, Willie said. And he didn't speak to Dark for the rest of the season and beyond. That had been a teammate of his and like that. And he just did not care for that. So that's another point of view to those who say that he wasn't enough of a pioneer. I have another baseball card from Mr. Mays. It's 1972, so it was his last Giants baseball card. Okay. Now, he played 98% of his team's games in that 13-year period, never fewer than 29 homers, 100 runs every year except 66 when he scored 99. More than 300 total bases every year. His lowest slugging percentage was .555, which is often a league leading total, and his on-base average was just under 400 those years. I have this little sculpture thing that I try to keep on display. There he is. A lot of these things were given to me by my cousin Anthony, who's a big baseball fan himself, but he was more, he's a Yankee fan. He was a big Frank Robinson fan, just like I'm a Met fan and a Willie Mays fan. So I thought that was nice. I would contend that his peak was as great as anyone's. But the reason I say medical marvel, I mean, you see, he's fairly ripped, but didn't lift weights and that kind of thing. He had a history of passing out from stress and things like that during the season. He really worked hard, as we know. And at one point they were checking up on him and they had a put like suction cups in his back, and the suction cups kept falling out because his back was all muscle. There was no fat to grab onto. So truly a natural athlete. And in fact, I know one of the articles, I didn't write this one, but in the 5 Tools book, the assertion is made that perhaps baseball was his 3rd best sport. That he led his high school team to a football state championship as quarterback, and he was a great basketball player as well. I think he was a point guard, if I'm not mistaken. So one of the more modern statistics is something called wins above replacement. I don't want to get into the fact that there are shortcomings to this statistic. I will say that it is an honest attempt to put everybody on the same playing field. You don't have to adjust. I mean, you adjust within the statistic for years, but
Thing I
sorry?
put in my mouth when I put my vegetables in it. I look.
Please mute. I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
No, I thought it was a question for me, but then I do grow vegetables. All right. So the wins above replacement statistic, a pitcher can be compared to a position player now with that sort of thing. That's one of the advantages of it. And, you know, they say that how much better are you than a replacement player? So I teach at Seton Hall University, and one of my students and I worked on our own version of wins above replacement. Now, one of the things about the statistics that exist is they use proprietary data that the average fan can't get a hold of. We call it SHU WAR, Seton Hall WAR. We do it with freely available statistics. So for example, Willie Mays' 1954 season, his WAR was 10.3. In the Fangraphs version, baseballreference.com's version has 10.6. Our estimate puts him at 10.64. So there's some consensus there. And then his other MVP season, 65, we all agree on 9. So you see, it's very interesting. Or they agree on 9. Ours was 12.54. But the fact is he led the National League and was the right choice for MVP both times in our estimation. So that's one of the things we looked at. Now, I will say this, if you look at things a little bit rich, I also put the catch there on the bottom. I thought the fans would like to see that again. You don't get tired of that, do you guys, folks? You don't get tired of seeing that one, do you? I know I don't, but you know, okay. So, Willie, Mickey, and the Duke. If we look back, he led the league in WAR, the National League, all these seasons. Position player. So conceivably, he could have won 10 MVP awards if you give the best pitcher the Cy Young Award. 10 MVP awards, including 66 when he's considered, you know, past his prime. Now, I don't know if you remember or are aware of this, Willie Mays for a little while had a chicken franchise. Willie Mays' Chicken. And he had 4 stores here in New Jersey that I know of. I went to 3 of them. Check out the hat.
John, what does that say?
It says Willie Mays Country Chicken. And then I use the cup as my to hold my pens and stuff on my desk. But what's really good is if I forget his statistics, they're on the back of the cup. So he had 1 store in Willowbrook Mall, Wayne, New Jersey, 1 in the Menlo Park Mall in Edison, New Jersey, and he had 1. Actually, I didn't live in Livingston at the time, but he had 1 here in Livingston, not in the mall. And there was also 1 in Bally's, Atlantic City, which I didn't make it to. So he had chicken franchises here in Jersey for a little while. And I'm trying to find something you guys might not know about. That's also, maybe you didn't know he was a chicken entrepreneur for a little while. Okay. So, and of course, you know, even without the discussion of WAR, we have his statistics. And if you look here, what we did is we tried to aggregate all his All-Star game appearances and pretend that they happened in a single season. If he did that, this would have been his numbers: 20 homers, tough to get the RBIs going, but 135 runs scored. He scored a lot of runs in the All-Star games, and it prorates out to that. 307 average. And then if you look at what he would have done in a regular season, we looked at it like that. So, and he was named the number 2 player in baseball history. And the Sporting News put that book out. It's a great honor to be named the number 2 player in baseball history. I have satisfaction of knowing that when they call my name, everybody knows me. If you asked me when I was 15 in Birmingham, if all this could happen, there was no way I would have said yes. And he wrote the foreword to that book. And so this is another present from my cousin. Hopefully it can fit on the screen, but it's a plaque that I have on my wall. It's Willie Mays, and unfortunately the glare, he's got his numbers on there as well. So I guess instead of coming off as a scholarly talk, I'm coming off as a borderline stalker. I don't know, but I'm just a very big fan. And so into even his retirement, the accolades continued. We see when they retired his number, he couldn't come. I think he was recovering from a hip replacement, so he couldn't make the trip to New York for this summer, but he did have a message, and his son Michael was there. It's in the picture as well. And then in 2015, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. So he, like I said, I predicted his number should have been retired. I stated that it should have been retired, and I thought that. And of course, we've seen his Hall of Fame plaque. Say hey, kid. I've been to the Hall of Fame maybe a dozen times or so. Every time I'm there, I take a picture with his plaque. It's just something you have to do. Just amazing. And I thought it'd be appropriate in the last slide to mention that in general, he's a cultural icon. And people might remember this Peanuts cartoon. When I get big, I want to be a great doctor. I want to be a doctor among doctors, a physician among physicians. I want to be the Willie Mays of medicine. How ambitious can you get? On the occasion of his 90th birthday, Dave Sheinin wrote, "There can never be another like Mays, if only because the elements for his creation no longer exist. Baseball no longer holds the imagination of the country the way it did in the 50s and 60s, which is unfortunate, but I don't think we'll see another Willie Mays." Well, I want to thank you. Anybody wants I don't know how Gary wants to run it from here, if we have a discussion, but
Yeah, John, just
sure.
before we
Sure.
turn it over, can you, take yourself off the.
Yep, absolutely.
Perfect. John, that was great. And honestly, with the other two coming up, I think your discussion is perfect because you're talking about his whole career, not just Willie the Met, and not about his defense. And you talk about him with such relevancy. This Mr. Mays stuff. I mean, there's no doubt about how much you truly admire him. So.
Well, yeah, and that's what struck me. If you remember, we had the guys who made the documentary were in, and one of my favorite parts is when he spoke at Barry Bonds's retirement or whatever, and Dwayne Kuiper says, "Well, Mr. Mays asked for the microphone. You give him the microphone." I just thought that was perfect.
So one question about, first of all, congratulations on getting in the new book now as well. Both books are great because they're stories about the Giants, so we could, get a lot of people to speak about that. But the initial book, the 51 book, were you approached to talk about him, or did you volunteer?
Well, no. What happened was this started before the books were coming out. Okay, the SABR, Society for American Baseball Research, decided to do this biography project. It was before that, and what they said was, "Listen, we want to start getting biographies," and Willie Mays was one of the first really big ones. And I said, I'm sure there were no shortage of people applying to do it. I mentioned that I had all 10 of the biographies and autobiographies that were out at the time, and I could, talk about him, and it was a labor of love. I mean, I've written a lot of articles, scholarly articles for mathematics. I'm a math professor, but also some of the other baseball articles. And this was the one that I feel was my best work, for whatever it's worth. And every time the editors get to it, they make some improvements. Bill Nowlin is just incredible. They say this thing, you check this, the fact checker thinks this, and I'm always able to come up with something. Like, for example, he played what would be considered a loosely affiliated minor league team, the Chattanooga Choo-Choos, where Piper Davis kind of stashed players and would bring them up to Birmingham. And he actually did play a little bit for them. But again, he wasn't professional. Otherwise, he couldn't have played in high school. It was a little different the way that was done. It was a loose confederation. I think there's a hand up. Oh.
Yeah, I'm going to call some people.
Sure.
But just, like I said, your love and admiration for him certainly came out in your presentation, which I thought was great. Bill
Thank you.
Clink, you're up. Bill, unmute.
There, I'm unmuted. Well, thank you very much. Any presentation about Willie is always appreciated. Any new and different perspective, and I really enjoyed learning about the chicken restaurants. That was something new.
I said I wanted to figure something new for. I mean, you guys saw a lot of you might have seen him play in the Polo Grounds. I did not. Okay, I would love to have seen the Polo Grounds.
I did want to help you on one thing.
Sure.
One of your slides has a few errors on it, and I wanted to help you correct it. The one on the 1950 Trenton Giants, I wrote the article about his play on the 50 Trenton Giants and
Okay.
last year. Herb Boeto is the catcher, Boetto.
Okay.
These are two of Herb's pictures from his personal collection.
Wow.
A Willie by the bus and Willie by the dugout. And I don't think there's anybody who can tell me who that guy that's sneaking into the picture is. But there was a big.
Bill, you
Please
just
mute
muted yourself. Bill, you
You're muted.
muted yourself.
You're mute, Bill.
My wife does that a lot, so I'll try not to. The guy to the outside of there, he's in the dugout. This guy by the name of Mike Colombo. Never played in the bigs, did play for the Trenton Giants on that. And the other guy was Bobby Easterbrook, and he was a pitcher on that team. And the outfielders, both of whom I interviewed for the article, wonderful men. Eric Skip Roden, who played one game. He actually played right field. He one game for the New York Giants. And Eric played right field. And the left fielder was a wonderful man by the name of Maurice Mo Cunningham, who was lived in Trenton, spent his whole life in Trenton. And that's who flanked Willie. In fact, Mo was the center fielder on that team until Willie showed up. And then Frank Burke, the Giant super scout at the time, said, "Tell you what, Mo, you can have your contract. We don't need it anymore. We got Willie Mays." So those are just a couple of things. If you do it again, Bobby,
No, I appreciate that, Bill, because I got to tell you, the source for this particular vignette was an interview with Willie Mays himself.
Yeah, and
The
Willie,
Museum of Living History. So this is going on his recollection, which obviously when we can correct it, we will. And that will be done. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's fine. But
We need this to be, this has to be, to me, has to be the best biography in the SABR collection. So I do what I got to do. You can tell I'm from Jersey too.
if Jerry gives me your address, I'm sure he will off screen here. I'll send you a copy of Willie's Wonder Years. That details.
I had that. Oh, I had that. Yeah.
You have Willie's Wonder Years. Okay. Well, then
I think
that has all the right names in it. So
Willie's Wonder Years. I've had that one. Yep.
A true labor of love. I'm glad you
that one.
enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Harvey, you're up. Unmute.
John, that was great. I didn't know. I wonder if I could still get that chicken.
No, it was good. It was better than Kentucky Fried Chicken. That's for sure.
I'm sure it was.
I have one more hat too. My Birmingham Black Barons hat.
Oh, that's cool.
I love that.
Fabulous.
I lost it on a log flume once.
You
I went
lost
back
it
the next day. They told me at the end of the day, it's in the trap. I went in the trap. I got it and revived it.
on-
Flew off my head.
and I'm glad that you have solved one issue for me. I've always tried to figure out how I could sit down with a calculator and come up with what is war, as opposed to saying it's absolutely nothing.
What is it good for?
Yes, Edmund Starr. Go ahead.
One, yeah, I Gary, thank you. I know you'd help me out there. John, we have discussed in this group that Willie was a 6-tool player. All the 5 that Leo came up with, and then there was something else. Willie was a field general. He still understands the game at age 92, minus 3 days, I guess.
Yeah.
2 days. I know it's his birthday is how many days, Steve?
Saturday.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what today's date is. I know. I saw Willie. I was 2 months shy of my 9th birthday. I saw Willie at the Polo Grounds. He made a great catch. He stole home, even though the box score says it was an error on the pitcher. But here's a play I wonder if you can quantify. I saw in 1967. I've talked about this to the group. My brother and I were at a game at Shea. Willie was playing for the Giants against the Mets, and he repositioned Jim Ray Hart in left field after the Mets substituted Larry Stahl as a pinch hitter. Larry Stahl was a big left-handed hitter, and the Giants brought in relief Gaylord. And whether Gaylord was throwing Vaseline or, whatever Gaylord was throwing, he was throwing it hard. And he relieved Mike McCormick, who was a soft tosser in those days. They called him a junk ball pitcher. He was he won the Cy Young that year.
He was lefty, wasn't he?
Yes, he
McCormick?
was.
Yeah.
And Willie, the left fielder that night was Jim Ray Hart. And Willie repositioned Jim Ray Hart from where we were sitting. My brother and I were sitting just to the outfield side of the infield, and on the right field side. And Willie, there weren't that many people in the yard that night. He signaled to Jim Ray Hart, positioned to the point where Larry Stahl kept fouling balls off to the left field, and eventually hit a screamer, which if Jim Ray Hart didn't catch it would have cut him in two. How do you quantify that, what Willie Mays did? Is that within WAR, or is that within the sixth tool? I say it's the sixth tool.
Yeah, clearly that's the sixth tool, but yeah, that's typical, right? We hear so many of those stories. And think about, well, when you told your story, it brought this in mind to me. And I know that Willie Mays is always thought of as someone who stayed around too long. But again, the next to last at bat of his career, he drove in the winning run in a World Series game.
Yes, he did.
And how did he do that? He kind of told Ray Fosse, "Oh, he better not throw me a foul. I can't see the shadows and everything like that." And hit that dribbler, went through the middle, and got the run in.
Well, that's all I want to say.
That's your sixth tool. There's your sixth tool right there.
Yeah, you can't quantify that. You can't, but it's
Nope.
there. He still got it. He's still got the sixth tool. Unfortunately, he doesn't have the other five, but he's got the sixth. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Howard, you're up, Howard. Good to see you, Howard. Howard, unmute, Howard. There you go.
Okay. I did see Willie at the Polo Grounds, but when it was when he was a Met. I was only 4 when they moved out of New York. So I saw him in '62, that very first weekend in June. Not the first game, but the second and the third games. And the crowds went, berserk. You would think he was a home player, which I guess in a way he was. And then a few years later, I was fortunate enough to catch Willie break one of his records, which has since been broken since. I was at Shea in August of '65. I think it was the 27th or the 29th. And he hit his 17th home run in the month of August, which broke the National League record at the time, which has since been broken. So we were very fortunate to see that. And that was his last real great season. He won the MVP, he hit 52 homers. And, he's in '66, he went down a little bit, and then he continued to go down towards the end. And one other memory, I've seen Willie a lot, but most of my memories are like, my father grew up a New York Giant fan back in the '30s, and we just loved Willie in the '50s, my brother and I, and the '60s. I was at the game in the opening game at Shea in '68, and it was Kuzman's first major league start. And the Giants loaded the bases in the very first inning, and Willie struck out swinging. And then there were 2 other strikeouts right after that. I think one was Jim Ray Hart, the other, I don't remember if it was McCovey or not. But I go back a long way with Willie. I eventually gravitated to the Mets, and once Willie became a Met, now I'm a Met fan 100%. Giants, a little nostalgia. In fact, I just came back from San Francisco. My daughter lives in San Francisco. And she just had a baby, if I could put in that plug. So my wife and I were out
Congratulations.
in, thanks, my first grandchild. So my wife and I were out in the Bay Area. We just flew back in. I still have jet lag 24 hours later or 48 hours later. And we did see the Mets. We saw the Giants and the Dodgers a couple of years ago, and the Giants actually won the game. First time I've ever seen a Giant Dodger game in person. But I've been a lifelong Mays fan. My grandmother, when I was 9 years old, gave me a bobblehead for my birthday, my 9th birthday. And those were the days where the bobbleheads looked like the players, like the real people. And I still have it. It has somewhat of a broken neck. I've had to glue it and scotch tape it. Probably the worst injury Willie's had in his career was just on my bobblehead. But yeah, we're Willie Mays fans. And I was at Citi Field for opening game this year. And the first thing I did was look up at number 24. Very first thing, I had to see it. And, you know, I saw a guy on the TV replays crying when they first revealed it. And at the Old Timers game last year. And that's how I felt. I mean, I didn't quite go to tears or anything, but I thought it was a wonderful thing that the Mets did. And they did it for the right reason, because Willie was New York National League Baseball. With the Yankees, it would have been a joke. But he was National League. And these people who argue, oh, you know, he should have, you know, 2 seasons. You know, you're right about Aaron. Somebody mentioned Aaron at Milwaukee. You know, Willie deserved it. And, you know, I'm glad he's around for another birthday. And we lost Willis Reed recently. You know, and I was a big Knicks fan back in the 70s.
Another hero of mine, by the way. Yep.
Yeah, and they honored him at Citi Field on opening day when they did the memorial before the game started. They put all like a dozen or so baseball players and executives and managers, and then they threw Willis up there, and the crowd was really stunned. So to me, it's a blessing that, you know, Willie is going to be 92, I think, and it's just great. So thanks for your presentation tonight, and thanks for being another big Willie Mays fan. I appreciate it.
Well, that's the thing. You mentioned Jerry Koosman there, and they were very close. In 73, very often after, like in the hotel, they'd sit and talk baseball all night and that kind of thing. And Koosman did try to talk him out of retirement. The team felt that he was a very good, integral part of the team, even if his numbers weren't there. Just again, that sixth tool, and how he was able to be a great teammate with them. And I think that at least the way the Mets said it, they talked to the teammates, and that's why in the picture of the retirement of the number, Cleon Jones, Ed Kranepool, those guys wanted that. And it certainly seemed to be something.
Teammates.
They were teammates, but they didn't begrudge him that. They thought his number, they would be appropriate to retire his number, even though he only played for the Mets 2 years because of all he had done. But then also apparently there was a promise from Mrs. Payson to do that. That was what was supposed to happen. And then, you know, when that idiot M. Donald Grant got involved, things never happened like that.
Yeah, well, M. Donald Grant. Grant's tomb.
Thank you, Howard. Mrs. Mays, you're up. Hindi, go ahead, make your Mays comment.
Oh, I wasn't going to talk, but
You have to.
I saw him in '62 in San Francisco, and I saw him in Cooperstown every year, and I had a '62 button, and he used to call me the button lady, so that's why they call me Mrs. Mays.
Of course.
He was delightful, even, you know, all those years in Cooperstown.
Thank you, Mrs. Mays.
I'm going to go and get the button.
Just a question. What year were those chicken places? When did they open?
They were like, I'd say maybe from the mid 80s to the mid 90s.
Okay,
roughly.
the reason I'm asking, me, like, I have a lot of rare Willie Mays stuff, and I don't want to tell you what I have. I don't think it's a public thing. I was in his apartment in Riverdale, which he still owns, but it's rented out. It's a what do you call it? It's a way up the 30th floor of the building, a penthouse apartment. His neighbor's was named Hall. It was a black family. The son went to my day camp one summer, so I got to meet Willie Mays in his apartment. But the neighbors, the Halls, it was Hall's Chicken. They owned some kind of a chicken company. So now this was in 1986 that I was in the apartment, but he was already there in his 70s. So that may have led to him getting those 4 places. And the last thing, you know, we talk about DiMaggio's hitting streak, 56 games. There's some records that won't be broken. This one will never be broken. He is the only player to hit a home run in every inning 1 through 16. Nobody's ever doing that.
Especially if they keep
Especially
that ghost
that
runner.
guy on second base in the 10th
Yeah.
inning.
Yep.
Thank you for your presentation. Brought
you,
back a
John.
lot of them.
Here's the
John.
button, just,
Oh, there, the
you
62.
go.
Yeah,
Nice.
he's got
John,
his game
save
face
that.
on.
That cup's got to be worth a lot of money. How many people have that chicken cup? Come on.
Oh, yeah. Well, I always keep it. I needed something to put my pens in. It was great.
Mr. Coleman, you're up.
Well, John, first of all, thank you for presentation.
you.
It was wonderful and just brought back great memories. A few things. One thing is I relate to you being a stalker of Willie Mays because that's what I do. Secondly, for Harvey's sake here, I would like to now say that Willie Mays was a 7-tool player. As we learned today, besides the 6 tools, Lita Rocher talks about the charisma. And the charisma not only off the field, but he had the charisma on the field too, that is unsurpassed, in my opinion. And then the last thing I just wanted to make a comment about Willie Mays is, I went starting in 1964, I've been going to opening days and in San Francisco. And in the 60s, the biggest thrill on opening day is they introduced the players by uniform number, except for 3 players, they wait until the end. And now number 27, Juan Marichal. Applause, applause, applause. And now Willie McCovey, bigger applause, applause, applause. And now Willie Mays. Tremendous ovation. The biggest story every night on the news for opening day is how long the ovation was for Willie Mays every year. And so I just wanted to share that with you. And once again, thank you.
That's great.
Thank you, Norm. Mars, you're up.
Oh, hi, thank you for the presentation. It was wonderful. I saw a video where Reggie Jackson was speaking about when in the World Series when Mays lost 2 balls in the sun, and he was talking about how that stadium was configured where the sun, it was configured incorrectly, where the sun would be shining into a outfielder's eyes, especially if the game is starting at 5 p.m. when, the World Series gravitated to those hours. And it was very unfair. Anybody could have dropped that ball. So Willie Mays, under normal circumstances, would have easily made those catches. And then, of course, Yogi Berra didn't pinch hit Mays. And that was truly regrettable. What are your comments on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because you hear conflicting stories. I know he very often would have to have his knee drained. He had water on the knee. And so they didn't know. I mean, I guess he had the ability to say when he was going to play and when he wasn't, which, was tough on a manager like Yogi Berra. And yeah, I'm kind of surprised because wasn't Darryl Knowles the pitcher? So it was a lefty, I think, and it would have been a natural thing to have him pinch hit, right? I mean, it was interesting that the manager thought that they had a better chance with him. It could be that also Willie Mays might have said, I can't go. I don't know. Like that, there's some things that we don't realize.
That's right.
We don't
Mays
know.
did want to pinch hit. He did.
Retroactively, he said that, but we don't know what he said that day, in all fairness. I mean, I don't know. I got a guy with 660 homers sitting there. I might want to put him up if he's able. Just saying.
Considering that after Bobby Thompson's home run when Mays was on deck, he said he was afraid if he had to bat in that particular game. But after that, he said, I want the bat in all circumstances. Albeit, it was the end of his career, but you can't take the fire out of, out of Willie Mays. I'm sure he wanted a bat.
Well, yeah, I guess we all would. Somebody put in the chat, and I appreciate that I had my dates were a little off. It was the one in Livingston opened in '94. It says, which makes sense. So it was a little later than we might have thought. But I guess, yeah, it was after because mid '80s is when they reinstated him, right? With the whole Bally's thing. So yeah, we were still affiliated, That makes
And
sense.
that was a real fallacy considering that
Oh,
they
no.
advertise FanDuel these days.
Oh, it's moronic to take Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle out of baseball. That's moronic.
Well, thank you for the presentation.
Miss
you.
Miss Barbara, welcome back.
This is such
Unmute.
a polite group. Yeah. It's such a polite group. Everybody's always muted.
Larry, you got to mute. Unmute. There you go.
Hey there. Hey, thank you. John, I've been reading this book, Devouring it, ever since it arrived last week. And your story about Willie coupled with Rob Nyers, that one time Willie Mays wasn't perfect, just explains so much about him that, I thought I knew, but those two stories, I mean, this issue of him fainting, I really didn't get how much of himself he gave and how it affected his health and his ability to, be consistent about how much he played. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing that he's even alive now. Anybody else would have worn themselves out 30 years ago. So thank you for explaining that. It was just amazing to read that. And I just love the amount of work that you put into it. But I do have a question related to your mathematics position at Seton Hall, because I used to impress on my friends, because everybody knows that there's 90 feet between bases, but not very many people know how far it is from first to third or from home plate to second base. And umpires know because it's in the rule book and we have to study all these dimensions. So 127 feet, 3 3/8 inches. But now I'm asking you, has that dimension changed because the bases have expanded by, I'm not sure how much they used to be 15 square inches. Now I'm not sure how many square inches they are,
Well,
but has that dimension changed? Do I have
Well, I
to
think for a base
memorize
run,
new
it's changed a bit for the base runner, but really when they measure, they're measuring from the center, I would think. So the center,
Right.
the 90 foot to the center, I don't think would have changed. It's a bigger area to hit when you're sliding in or running in, right? I think if you're measuring from point to point, I don't think that's changed. I'm glad you
Excellent.
told me it's 127. I only know it as 90 times the square root of 2, so that's helpful.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, great job on that story and your presentation.
I
Thank
appreciate
you,
that.
Barry. Judge Jim, you're up.
Thank you. John, your first slide, you had a button of Willie Mays on there and that came from New
The
York.
Daily News had a thing you could send in for it at the time. This was in 1972 when he was first acquired by the Mets. The Daily News went nuts.
Okay.
And that was Bill Gallo, who I had the privilege of meeting Bill Gallo. I took in his garbage cans for him because I had to pick him up in Yonkers to take him up to West Point. And he was wearing his Marine Corps pin, and the officers were saying Semper Fi. It was quite something. But yeah, I got Bill Gallo. I have a nice, you might like this cartoon, which the Daily News is what I read. And so this was when he got elected to the Hall of Fame. I have a little scrapbook here. I don't know if you could see it. But basically the kids are saying he can't play stickball today. He's got to go to Cooperstown. So.
Well, my question's about these buttons. Hindi, I didn't know you were the button lady, but I don't know if you can see this. I have one button. That's Johnny Antonelli. He gave me this, and I was just wondering, how are they distributed? You don't get buttons anymore, and I'm just wondering a little if anyone has any history on how these buttons went.
I had to send away for this. They had it back at the Daily News. And I just realized I still have it after almost 50 years. Oh, more than 50. Wow, more than 50 years.
Were they distributed at the games, or did people?
No,
Not
no.
mine. Nope. They had to send away for it.
Not the news one. You had to
I
order.
had this at the game in 1962. I
62?
think.
That's different.
Yeah, and this one for Antonelli would have been. How would that have been distributed or acquired?
The game, probably.
The game. They would give
That
them
would
out
be
at
the game,
games.
Not the Daily News one.
Not that one.
Yeah. Okay, interesting.
John.
And then
Cool.
I'm sorry,
one other
Jim, go
real
ahead.
quick comment. I've got a chance to meet Willie once. Same thing at
lucky.
an autograph signing in Rochester that he did in probably late 70s, and I still remember his biceps. He was ripped. I mean, he had big arms, and it just really surprised me how strong he still looked, and he looked
Yeah.
great. So, yeah, so those pictures of him, you know,
Yeah.
how muscular he was. Yeah, I remember that distinctly. So thank you.
you.
Judge, a lot of those badges were sold at the concession stands,
Okay.
and then they had sometimes a little pennant or something, or a little thing hanging off of them. I remember them, they would have them, at least a candlestick, they were on a large placard, and the guy would sell any number of things that was hanging on it.
Ah,
One of them, they would have any number of players, like the Antonelli, and I have one of Brassu, and, you know, things that, it was that and the Nodders that they had. Oh, I should have one of those Nodders today.
Hmm.
They're worth
that
it.
makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome.
Mr. Gates, welcome back. Great to see you. You're up.
Hey, good to see everybody. And there's
Another
been
good
so
job.
many nice things said about Willie Mays this evening, and I wanted to add a few very positive stories to that to give you some of my experiences with him. When I was a kid, my dad was in the Navy, and we moved around a lot and lived in some minor league cities. And one year when we were living in Norfolk, Virginia, he came through toward the end of his career with the New York Mets and played the Tidewater Tides, had one at bat and hit a home run to dead center field. As a kid, of course, you don't forget seeing something like that. And then, decades later, when I'm working at the Hall of Fame, I had the chance to work with him on a number of occasions. And I told him about that home run, and he was able to actually tell me who was pitching and where the pitch was that he hit the dead center, which I thought was pretty remarkable. But what I've learned over time is most of these great ball players, they remember things like that for decades. They know specific pitches and where they went and what they did with them. And all of my experiences with him at the Hall of Fame were very positive. But in our family, Willie is known for a completely different story. For any of you who've been to Cooperstown during induction, back before his eyesight went, he used to do autograph sessions at Mickey's place right on Main Street.
Yeah.
And
Downstairs.
my wife and later my son worked at Mickey's place. And one year, my wife was assigned the job of sitting at the table with Mickey down in the lower level and just helping keep things organized during the autograph session. So my wife sat with Mickey for hours that day and
Willie,
chatted
Willie.
with him
Mickey,
and
you
talked
mean
to him.
Willie? You mean Willie?
What's that?
You mean
You mean
Willie?
Willie? Sat with
Willie. Excuse me. Yeah, at Mickey's place. So,
Right.
she really enjoyed it, said he was quite the gentleman, and she enjoyed her day with him. And I'm of course drooling that my wife could sit and talk baseball with Willie Mays all day long. And the next year, when he came back to do the same thing, he told Vinny Russo, the guy who owns the store, can I have that nice older lady who worked with me last year? And so in our family, Willie Mays is known as the guy who referred to my wife as that very nice older lady. And unfortunately, my wife had left the employ and was working at our B&B at the time, and our son was working there. And so Vinny said, well, she's not here anymore, but this is their son, Sean, and he's going to sit with you this year. And so my son got to sit with Willie all day and do, helping keep things organized. And on 2 occasions, Willie was signing baseballs and intentionally would smudge them with his fingerprint so that they couldn't be sold. And he would say, oh, darn, this one's messed up. Here, Sean, it's for you. So it's just the kind of guy I think Willie was. If you were nice to him and worked with him, he was just a special person. And that's the experience that my family had with Willie.
That's great.
Great
Great
story.
Jim.
That's great.
All right, we're going to go to Norm, and then we're going to close out with Renee.
I just wanted to show you the buttons that Bill was talking about.
Oh, the ribbon, yeah.
This is what they had in the 60s at the ballpark.
Thank you so much, Norm. Renee, I know he's your guy, so say something.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, my mom, when she came to this country from Puerto Rico, was a Giants fan. She was a Monty Irvin fan. She used to tell me when I was a kid. So when Willie came up, she was like, wow. And the people at the factory that she worked in, you know, there were some Brooklyn Dodger fans and Giant fans, and they'd go at it, you know, and listening to her stories, listening to the games on the radio, was a treat with my mom. I mean, it was a lot of fun. And we would try to go to games at Shea when the Giants would be in town, see Willie play. I guess the story I'm leading to is coming up next week. But I think it was a week before the trade happened. Me and my brother got together. We've been saving money to buy Met tickets. We found out the Giants were going to be in town. It was Mother's Day on Sunday. So I'll go to Manufacturers Hanover, the diagram, the guy's on the phone, he's pulling out the colors, where it was sitting. God, I wish I could find those tickets. It's somewhere. But believe it or not, we could afford it. We were like past third base, going towards the outfield, kind of between third base and the left fielder. And there it was. Days later, the trade happened. Stunned. We go there. I mean, when I was a kid, every time I went to the ball game, I would look at the scoreboard on what's the lineup. To see 24 leading off, it's crazy. Hitting a home run, crazy. Fast forward, finding out that, Mets owner, Joan Payson, had some ownership part of the Giants. I mean, it just oozed into me like, wow. And when it never happened, his retirement, saddened me, bummed me out over the years of the Mets. And let me tell you something, that Met old timers game got me. And when they did that speech, if my wife was right here, she'd tell you, I cried a river. I lost it. I was so happy. I ran. I got my pictures out. I was like a kid, like looking at pictures again. Let me tell you something. To this day, he's still my favorite. He's still, I mean, what the news you just gave was phenomenal. Plus the chicken stuff, never knew that. Everything else I knew of. I appreciate everything this group is a part of, as well as yourself. Thank you for this. Thank you. Thank you,
Renee. Yeah, that the whole Joan Payson connection. I think that when the Mets first started, made all kind of offers to the Giants to try to bring them, and the Giants were smart enough not to do it. Right? I mean, 5 players and $1 million, and no thanks.
But I'm glad we got him. I was one of very few that said, I don't care. We got him. I got to see him.
Same way.
I was like, oh.
Great, if I can add on to that Willie Mays trade to the Mets, I sat with Gil Hodges' daughter, Irene Hodges, a few weeks ago, and we were talking about that trade, and it seemed that Gil Hodges was against bringing Willie Mays to the Mets, and it took upon his death for Joan Payson to acquiesce to have that trade made.
Well, it was about a month later. Yeah, I mean, and conversely, Gil Hodges, from what Rusty Staub said, he was big for the Rusty Staub trade at that time. We're getting a bit far afield there, but he spoke at the Mets 50th anniversary conference, and he said to Gil Hodges Jr., "Take that back to your mom. My biggest regret was I never got to play for your dad." So that's the thing. But then the minute Joan Payson was gone, M. Donald Grant traded him. For Mickey Lolich and a bag of bats or something.
Yeah.
John, fabulous presentation. Again, John contributed to this amazing book that's been out a few years. And he's also featured in the brand new book, which I didn't know John contributed to until I got the book. But John, the best way to get both books, I assume, if you're not a SABR member, is through Amazon, correct?
I think that they might give you the best price. Yeah. Perfect.
Let's all give it up for John Saccoman.
Oh, appreciate that. Thank you.
John, really, you kicked off our the month of May's in splendid fashion. Please don't hesitate to come back, okay?
I appreciate that, and I'm humbled that you guys received this talk so well. Again, I'm not someone who saw him play at the Polo Grounds or anything like that. It's just something that's kind of been. Now I'm realizing it's just been my whole life. So thank you.
Let's give it up for John.
Gary, here's the park where he broke in. This is Memorial Stadium in Hagerstown. and I was there in October of 16. And make sure I'm on it there.
There you go.
It's a beautiful ballpark, and in fact, they have his number retired on the outfield, in the outfield there. That's the outfield wall at Memorial Stadium.
Nice.
The worst part about that stadium was it was segregated in 1950.
All right,
And-
we will we'll see each other next next Thursday. The following week is going to be on a Wednesday. It got
It
changed
is?
from the 18th to the 17th. But next week it's going to be on May 11th. So we will see everybody next week. I will shut the recording off, and then if anybody wants to hang around and talk Giant baseball, we can. John, thank you so much again.
Thank you, Gary. Thanks for inviting
Be
me.
well.